If any of you have seen my previous videos, you know that I absolutely love coming up with my own anime power systems and the possible abilities that can exist within them. At this point, I've made 2 different power systems, and while one is clearly done better than the other, I've decided that I wanted to pursue a story based on the shard system from the last video. The first system I did based on constructs is amazing, but it's much better suited for a TTRPG or anthology type of series, so I've decided that I'm going to continue fleshing out the power of shards and try my best to create an actual story based on that system. Now with that little announcement out of the way, this video isn't really about that story. In this video, I wanted to expand upon some of the shard ideas that I didn't mention in the last video since there's just so many cool possibilities out there. And y'all wanted to hear more anyway, so I figured why not. If y'all are interested in following along with this project though and you want to get involved in a community, I'm also launching a Discord that you guys can join. I don't really know how it's gonna go, but tons of you guys have been asking for it in the comments, so I figured why not go for it. Oh, and by the way, stick around to the end of this video if you want to see a little demo for the story that we've been working on. Now with that little announcement out of the way, let's dive back into the world of shards. For those who are new to the channel and aren't familiar with shards, I'll do a quick explanation of what they are, but I'll also put up a timestamp on screen that jumps right into the new stuff if you're already familiar with the system. Basically, before the world as we know it existed, reality was an infinite web of concepts known as the primordial canvas. No human could possibly ever conceive what the primordial canvas truly was because it's beyond our realm of understanding. There were no people, no actions, no independent thoughts, just a massive interconnected web of existence held solely together by unity. One day, however, the canvas collapsed similar to the Big Bang in the real world, scattering individual pieces of the canvas across the world which became known as shards. These shards each control a specific aspect of reality, for example light, darkness, growth, decay, fire, ice, etc. There's about 1,000 different shards spread across the world, and when someone finds one and they want to use its power, the shard changes from an indestructible object into a gem that can be crushed simply by squeezing it in one's hand, with its aura then blasting into the air as it spreads around the user before condensing into their body and giving them superhuman powers, as well as slightly changes their appearance to something that correlates with the shard. If someone tries to use the power of 2 or more shards though, those shards begin to fight within a person's body as they can't fit together unless the primordial canvas is fully restored, which makes them fuse in unnatural ways and turn that person into a canvas wraith, a powerful creature looking to spread death and destruction and losing their humanity. That's pretty much the spark notes of the system, but that should be about enough to understand the basics, so without further ado, let's jump right into some shards. Winning is a concept that seems simple in nature, but when it comes to the Shard of Victory, the essence of triumph is taken to a whole new level. This shard appears to be a glowing yellow cube-like gemstone that when crushed emits a soft yellow haze before condensing into the user. Some physical traits this stone might apply could be a glowing bandana that seems to attach to a person's forehead, or maybe bands of energy that circle around someone's fingers resembling brass knuckles. Now the name Victory sounds like it would imply the user always wins their fights, and that's only somewhat true. Essentially, the shard consists of 2 main abilities, one being power equalization and the second being conditional winning. Power equalization essentially matches the user's power to whoever they're fighting against. So if you're going up against a street level thug, the shard's power isn't really going to activate, but a fight with a massive villain would spike a user's physical prowess to tremendous heights. This makes every physical fight an even playing field, so the match would ultimately always come down to a battle of skill and individual abilities. Now the second ability known as conditional winning is where a user creates a specific condition during their fight with the shard itself. A user couldn't just say that they want to win a fight and win it, but every individual attack or movement can become a win if the user wants it to be. Say an enemy has an ironclad defense that's super hard to break through, well in that case a user could create a condition stating that this punch will absolutely break through this barrier. Or if a target is insanely fast and super hard to pin down, the user could say that this punch will land no matter what. The true limit to this ability comes from the consequences reaped by the shard for every condition that's applied. Power equalization essentially has no drawback, but with every condition a user sets, the shard determines a drawback based on the significance of the rule. For every punch that a user forces to land, the shard could set a drawback where they will pass out for an additional 5 minutes after the fight is concluded. Or for one massive condition like this strike will pierce the enemy's heart, the shard could cripple a person's limb or even reduce one's lifespan. It's pretty much a gamble that the user has to think about before setting a condition, and in my opinion that's what makes the shard so unique. It grants the ability to use tremendous power, but it has no mercy upon the person using it. The Shard of Gravity is another one that's been on my mind, as its powers would be absolutely insane and probably top 10 in the verse. This shard would appear as a perfect sphere that is far heavier than it looks, with swirling of black, purple, and orange light on the inside resembling a black hole. When someone crushes this shard, instead of a more common misty aura that flies into the air, a deep rumble would hum through the earth as a zone of gravity intensifies around a person, collapsing them to their knees as purple lights flash around them before subsiding and being sealed away in the user. This new resonant might gain planetary looking rings that circle around their arms, eyes that resemble black holes, or possibly even cracked skin with edges that glow with a purple hue. Now compared to the previous shard, this one has all kinds of different use cases and unique abilities. For example, a person could funnel all their energy into making this shard a pure physical booster, like enhancing the weight of their fist 1,000-fold to deal insane damage, or altering their own body to not be affected by gravity when jumping high into the air, then increasing the load once again to become a human missile blasting towards the ground. But a user could also use this for purely range and AoE attacks as well, like creating zones of intense pressure where enemies would be unable to move, or sending out shockwaves of increased force to blast enemies away. I could even see a twisted version of Gojo's Infinity where any attacks or projectiles that get sent at this person would enter a gravitational field that absorbs the impact and launches the attack right back where it came from. Overall though, this shard kinda has everything. Close range, distance, offense, defense, and restraining abilities. It has it all. It might not have many hacks abilities like some of the other shards on this list, but in terms of raw power output and potential versatility, it definitely makes sense why this shard would be so strong. Another super interesting shard could be the Shard of Games, a power that completely inverts the rules of any fight. This shard would be a pink glowing crystal that roughly takes the form of a chess piece, and when looking inside, it would show all these little fragments of board game pieces floating around encapsulated by a misty aura. When crushing the shard, the sound of laughter would spread through the air as game pieces seemed to dance and animate before shrinking down and entering into a new resonance body. This shard might create strings between a person's finger almost like a puppet master, or even create a checkerboard pattern on a person's fingernails or eyes. With the power of this shard, a user could essentially turn any fight that's supposed to be a battle of strength into something completely different. A villain who expected to beat someone to a pulp could be forced into a scenario where they have to play a game of chess or a game of tag, and whoever loses earns a fatal punishment. When engaged in a game, real combat becomes impossible as your body won't even let you move to attack someone, and that includes both parties involved. The biggest rule of these games is fairness, so the Resonant doesn't actually have a technical advantage. However, if they are much better at the chosen game, they would obviously increase their odds. Failure to participate in this game from either party would automatically result in a loss, so once someone is locked into the game, there's literally nothing else that they can do except play. Outside interference is also blocked, as when this game would activate, a barrier would go up around the two parties that blocks out all contact to the outside world. Honestly, I think that this shard is super interesting because there's absolutely no deception, and every fight is completely fair. But if a Resonant has incredible knowledge about many games, they could easily win fights against opponents who are much physically stronger than them, which I think makes for a very powerful concept. The next shard that I want to mention is the Shard of Kings, which would appear as a blue and yellow crystal that seems to roughly take the shape of a small castle. Upon looking inside, there seems to be one large light that illuminates the center surrounded by thousands of smaller fainter dots. When a user crushes this shard, the center light would appear to grow in the air as all the other particles circle around it before shrinking down into the user's body. Some visual changes can include a small golden crown that's impossible to take off, or maybe a glowing crest tattoo on one's back. As for this shard's powers, it definitely depends on who's using it because there's quite a few possibilities, but overall this shard would excel in anything that has to do with commands, leadership, army, and territories. Kings naturally have increased power just because they command nations full of people, but this shard would allow anyone to achieve king-like strength without actually needing followers. Using this power, Resonants can raise armies to fight for them, control weak-willed soldiers or citizens, and even create areas of dominion where their power is increased. This shard essentially grants two main strengths. One is the power to use abilities like a king, like summoning armies of soldiers and raising castles, but it also holds the ability of controlling others. Weak-willed people are often the ones to become the subject of kings, so if the user wanted to, they could easily take control of the actions of certain citizens and soldiers. And if this Resonant was in an area they claimed as their dominion, or maybe they were sitting on their throne, they could potentially increase their power to control and access stronger people's wills. This shard can let a user create armor and weapons for themselves too, but overall the physical buffs aren't the main focus of this power. The main power of this shard comes from its strength in numbers, as it would only increase the individual Resonant's power slightly, but it would give them so much indirect power through their summoned minions, structures, and controlled individuals that I think it would make for some very sick characters. Now this one's a bit different, but another shard idea that I had that could be really interesting is the Shard of Knowledge. This shard would be a green gem that seems to sprout open from the middle almost like a book. And when looking inside, it doesn't look like much, but it gives you this feeling of a clustered void that seems to have no end. Upon crushing this shard, sounds and colors of all different varieties will blast into the air before condensing into the user's body. This person might gain a third eye on their forehead or glowing spots on their body that seem to align with their chakra points. As for the actual powers, this shard is pretty unique because it's generally not considered much of a combat shard. The powers of this gem are numerous, but ultimately they all have to do with brain processing. Increased critical thinking skills and IQ are obvious traits, but the main power of this shard comes from its instantaneous learning ability. By touching any piece of literature or media, a person can fully absorb all the information within it and process it at insane speeds. Information overload can occur if the Resonant tries to take in too much information too fast and they can freeze up, but ultimately that freeze will fade and it won't cause any problems. If another person consents, this shard also gives the user the power to learn about a certain idea by touching another person. Say there's a blacksmith who's been forging equipment for 50 years and the user wants to gain his experience and knowledge. If that man accepts the proposal, the resident can touch that man's head and gain 50 years of blacksmithing knowledge instantaneously. The craziest part about this shard though isn't just how the knowledge is absorbed, but it can also be fully utilized by the user. This person wouldn't just have 50 years of blacksmithing knowledge with nothing to show for it, they would also acquire the experience of the user so they could forge just as well as that blacksmith, provided they have enough physical strength for it, of course. This also means that prestigious warriors, fighters, and books on fighting techniques are all sources of information that the resident can acquire and use. So even if they may not have insane superhuman strength, they can still use some of the best fighting techniques out there to make them extremely formidable. Another power that I'd like to mention is the Shard of Belief. This shard would appear as a glowing white triangular crystal, and when looking inside, whatever a person believes most would manifest. Maybe it's a god, a loved one, or even themselves. The shard's insides change depending on who's looking at it. Upon crushing the shard, white particles would shoot into the air, creating a swirling vortex before collapsing into the user. I could see residents gaining glowing prayer beads around their necks or possibly crosses tattooed into their palms. What's so unique about this power is that unlike many other shards that are pretty self-contained, this shard solely relies on the beliefs of others. The more that a certain idea is believed in by the masses, the more powerful the summon is when the user calls upon it. For example, the legend of an ancient all-powerful god may have incredibly devoted followers, but because the masses don't believe in them, it wouldn't be very powerful if the resident tried to use its power. The thing a user gets to call upon though doesn't have to be real though. For example, if enough people believe in Santa Claus, a resident could totally call upon Santa's power to create a sleigh that flies through the sky and delivers gifts to millions of people all at once. Hope and despair are also factors that are tied heavily into belief. Like if the majority of the population actually believed in a god, the user could totally summon a large godlike figure with insane powers. Or maybe tons of people believe that spiders are dangerous, and that gives the resident the ability to create massive spider creatures more powerful than they would be naturally. Out of all things that people could believe in though, there's one factor that triumphs above all else, and that's death. A super cool trump card that this character could have could be the ability to summon a Grim Reaper, where it would appear as a massive Shikigami style creature that if its scythe even grazes you, your life force would get completely drained. Overall, this shard definitely has some sick use cases and abilities, but its open-ended nature still leaves a lot up to the imagination. The final shard that I'd like to talk about is the Shard of Propulsion, and even though it might not sound as powerful as some of the other shards on this list, I think it still has a ton of really awesome use cases. This shard would be a glowing light blue oval style gem that when looking inside seems to have these glowing rings stacked on each other from bottom to top. After this shard is crushed, the rings of that gem would expand to encapsulate the user before shrinking down and phasing into a user's body. I imagine some cool visual traits could be bands on someone's arms that glow and almost bounce, or a pair of glowing goggles that seem to wrap around someone's eyes and fade into their temples. This shard would allow a resident to propel any part of their body to insane speeds, as well as manipulating the acceleration of any molecules about a foot away. With these powers, a resident could speed up by increasing the propulsion of their entire body, or even launch fast attacks by speeding up their limbs. However, even with that said, the exterior molecule control is really what makes this power shine through. By manipulating air molecules to gather up and accelerate towards their own feet and then propelling off that air, users can essentially blast through the air and mimic flight. Or right as their fist is about to hit someone's face, they can propel that person's face into their fist while increasing the speed of their own fist simultaneously to output even more damage. If a user is handcuffed or needs to break through some kind of barrier, they could also increase the speed of whatever's binding them and force the material apart, making this power great for speed, damage, and overall freedom. So while this shard might not be the most unique or powerful, regardless I still think it's a really cool idea and can make for some really awesome characters. Now that's all I got for the shards, but I do have a few more important announcements as well. With the most important thing being that if you're interested in a demo of this story and what it could sound like, I've actually been working with a writer to bring this story to life, and you can go check the pinned comment on this video for an example part of the story. Once again though, if you guys are interested in joining the community or just hanging out, then head on over and join the Discord and make sure to stay subscribed for more vids. I would also just like to mention that I really appreciate the support on the recent vids, but I don't want to fully box myself into just making powers and stuff. So while don't worry, I'm still working on creating more creative style stuff. I'm gonna try and make some more regular anime style content too, so stay tuned for that. And sorry for the later upload. I've been trying to do a video every 2 weeks, but I ended up getting pretty sick, so I had to push this one back a bit. But now we should be getting back on track and getting these videos out more consistently, so I just want to say thanks for sticking around. With that said though, that's about everything I got, so I hope y'all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!